So this is Group 4's presentation of correlational research. Correlational research is a type of research method that involves observing two variables in order to establish a statistically corresponding relationship between them. The aim is to identify variables that have some sort of relationship to the extent that a change in one results in some change in the other. A correlational research design is useful for all types of quantitative data sets. So we have three different correlational coefficients, and this ranges from -1 to +1. So what does this mean? A positive correlation shows that there's a positive relationship between the two variables. As one variable increases, so the other variable increases. An example of this is as a child grows, so does their clothing size. You can see a graphical representation how it slopes upward and to the right. Conversely, a negative correlation indicates that there is a negative relationship between the two variables. As one variable increases, thus the other variable decreases. An example of this, unfortunately, is as we age, our agility decreases. You can see the middle graph has a negative correlation as it slopes downwards. Last is zero correlation. The zero correlation is a coefficient of 0, and this indicates that there is no relationship. An example of this is the relationship between intelligence and height. An increase in height does not lead to any changes in intelligence. The visual representation in the last graph here shows that there's no slope at all. It's a parallel and straight line. So the steps in correlational research, the first step, of course, is always to create a hypothesis. The researcher defines a set of variables, including an outcome of interest, and then tests for the hypothesized relations amongst the variables. The outcome is known as the dependent variable, and the variables being tested for association are the independent variables. There are three types of correlational studies: cohort studies, cross-sectional studies, and case-controlled studies. Cohort studies are a type of longitudinal studies that follows research participants over a period of time. And usually they share some sort of common characteristic, such as a particular occupation or a demographic. A cross-sectional study design is a type of observational study design where the investigator measures outcome and the exposures in the study participants at the same time. A case-controlled study is a study design that compares two groups of people, those with a disease or a condition under study, the cases, and very similar group of people who do not have the disease or the condition, the controls. Afterwards, the results are analyzed. What are the results? Were the hypothesis correct? So there's some characteristics of correlational research. It's not experimental. This means that the researcher only measures and observes the relationships between the variables without altering or subjecting them to external conditioning. They can be backward looking, as it only looks back in historical data and observes events in the past. And they can be dynamic. The dynamic patterns between two variables from correlational research are never constant, and they are always changing. So we do see some limitations in correlational research. The big thing is correlation does not imply causation. That's the big thing. Next is you really can't omit the likelihood of other extraneous variables. And the methods are not really useful when researchers want to see it in isolated effects with one variable on another. There are some positive sides, however, to correlational research. They're easy to interpret, they're cost-effective, they're applicable, they can guide future research, and they can determine the strength and the relationship between different variables. So the example that we have here is a study exploring the relationship between resilience and grit among nursing students. This is valid because the field of nursing is facing lots of turnover in the world. The goal of this correlational study was to find factors that can increase job persistence in nursing, which is believed to have a positive impact on both the quality and cost of healthcare. In the past, resilience and grit have been studied as potential factors that help an individual persist in the pursuit of their goals. The terms resilience and grit have been used interchangeably. However, some studies suggest that they are different constructs, and this study aimed to determine if that in fact is true. This was deemed important to develop qualities in new nurses that will increase their job persistence and satisfaction. So the study was a descriptive correlational design conducted at a private university in the United States. There were 348 nursing students used via convenience sampling from 3 pre-licensure programs. 2 scales were used, one measuring resilience and the other was measuring grit. The Connor-Davidson resilience scale uses a 10-item 4-point Likert scoring to measure resilience. The higher the score, the higher the resilience. Grit was measured using the short grit scale. The survey consists of 8 questions to measure grit. Each response within the 5-point Likert scoring is associated with a numerical value. All the points are then added and then divided by 8. The highest score is 5, indicating extremely gritty or persistent, or lowest score is 1. So in statistics, correlation tests assess the relationships between variables without assuming causation. The only parametric correlation tests for correlation studies are Pearson's R test. The correlation coefficient is denoted by R, which tells you the strength of a linear relationship between the 2 quantitative variables. However, to test the correlation in the sample is strong enough to be important in the population, you need to also perform a significant test of correlation to obtain a p-value. The p-value measures the probability of obtaining the observed results, assuming that the null hypothesis is true. The lower the p-value, the greater statistical significance in the observed difference. The p-value in this study is statistically significant. So weak positive correlation falls within the range of 0.1 to 0.3. In this case, the R value of 0.328 denotes a weakly positive correlation of how resilience correlates to grit. Conversely, the correlation of grit to resilience has an R value of 0.595, a moderately positive correlation. The statistical analysis of the results suggests resilience and grit scales are distinct but correlate well. The relationship between resilience and persistence effort was deemed moderate. Resilience tends to be closely related, although distinct from persistence. So what are the big takeaways from this study? Resilience and grit are not synonymous. Resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. Persistence is the firm or obstinate continuance of a course of action despite the difficulty or opposition. I was looking at how they differ, and I saw a blog post from Wakeman who states that the difference lies in the words firm and obstinance. An individual with persistent quality often closes the doors to new information, while the resilient individual holds space for new and other ideas. The difference lies between the two attributes could be vital to the development of educational, personal, and professional curriculum of schools of nursing. So while we're looking at the reference slide, I just want to recap. There's a positive correlation between grit and resilience. The purpose of correlational research is to test the strength of association between the two variables. The variables are only observed. There's no manipulation or interventions done to variables by researchers. Limited control is used, so other variables may play a role in the relationship of variables, thus correlation is not equal to causality. And there is high external validity within correlational research methods, as one cannot confidently generalize conclusion to other populations or settings. Thank you so much.